before, is the application, the extension of privacy rights to the cognitive domain. So it's designed to protect brain information from unconsented access by third parties. Now, this is an instance of general privacy rights, but what is questionable, what is not clear yet, is what is the position, what is the location of brain data in the current data protection landscape. So if we consider brain data as general personal data, or personal identifiable information, as it's called in the United States, then it would fall under the protections, for example, of the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe. But there is still uncertainty about where brain data should be located in the current data protection landscape. And this is something that my colleagues and I and some other researchers globally are trying to figure out at the moment. And there is also one second argument. So besides this sort of taxonomic uncertainty, there is a second argument in favor of specification of the requirements for privacy in the mental and cognitive domain. And this is the fact that brain activity can be potentially recorded from an individual without their direct awareness and without their direct comprehension of the kind of information that is being collected from them. So for example, if I am using, for example, consumer electroencephalography PCI for, let's say, gaming purposes, then there is still background information that can be read and accessed that is not directly relevant for the task that I'm performing in that particular moment. But that's redundant background information that can be accessed, and companies might have a commercial interest in mining those data for whatever purposes, for psychographic profiling, for training the algorithms, and so on. So since there is no conscious control in the filtering of brain data flows, this creates a problem, because our privacy right, privacy is both a right and an ability. And as an ability, it's based on the assumption that people have the ability to filter in and out the flow of information and make conscious decisions about what information they want to seclude to the public, and which information they are fine with sharing with the public. But in order to have this ability to filter in and out the flows of information, you need to have conscious rational control over that information. This is something that cybersecurity experts know very well when they say that the best antivirus is the brain. By that they mean that the best way, the best protection you have for securing your data is using your brain and making conscious decisions about which websites is safe to visit and which ones is not safe. But this ability of having a center of conscious rational control of the flow of information does not apply when you are actually processing data about that same center that is supposed to process that information. There is a sort of inception problem there, and this creates an additional problem, I would say.
I'm not sure I understand that. Are you saying that someone who is having an EEG measuring their brain activity, that they cannot consciously influence what the readings will be? Like, let's say I'm educated in how EEGs work. I know what sort of mental activity that they measure. Couldn't I then try to think about a specific object to to guide?
To put it simple, the problem, this so-called inception problem, is that the best tool you have in order to protect brain data is the brain itself. So the best tool you have to protect that set of data and computations is the same processor of data and computation that you want to protect. This simply creates an additional problem from my personal point of view. But if you want to practical examples of how privacy rights might be spelled out in the years to come, the most direct applications I would see are not necessarily in the area of mind reading. When I talk about mental privacy, a lot of people do a sort of a slippery slope argument, and they immediately assume that what is at stake is mind reading. So the possibility of reading the content of thoughts from human reasoning. And this might be an instance of scenarios that are protected under the mental privacy right. But this is a far-fetched scenario. I think we're very far from reading the content of thoughts, because in order to read the content of thoughts, you need to understand and decode the language of thoughts, the language of the brain. And we are very far from having decoded the language of the brain. So I personally think, this is a logical possibility, and with advancing technology, with better recording techniques and better AI analytics, we might get there at some point, at where we can decode human thought and their content. But I think there are privacy-sensitive inferences that you can make about the human brain that do not involve decoding human thought at all. So, for example, you can access data that correlate with the neurological signatures of disease. So you can be, for example, a user of a consumer device, and the data that the device is able to collect can be, if adequately mined, can reveal basically biomarkers of disease, say an increased risk of developing a mild cognitive decline or even Alzheimer's disease dementia in the next 2-3 years. And if not adequately secured, and if accessed by third parties, for example, health insurance providers or employers, that information can lead to significant harm to the data generator. So, for example, if say my company knows that I'm going to develop Alzheimer's disease in the next 2 years, they might want to terminate my contract, or my health insurance provider might want to increase my premiums. And here we are not reading anything remotely close to human thought, but still that information can be used to make inferences that are quite privacy sensitive. And so in this implication of mental privacy, I think it's more and more important in the big data ecosystem that we live in. Because there's a lot of research, for example, in digital phenotyping that shows that you can actually make quite reliable inferences about people's future probability of developing a certain mental illness by looking even at indirect measures, such as your mobile data, smartphone data. So this is really an example of basically making privacy sensitive inferences from data that are prima facie known sensitive, right? And this raises an entire set of challenges when it's applied to the neurocognitive domain, which is extremely private by default.
Yeah.